Federal Reserve searching for more confidence before starting the rate cutting cycle. Minneapolis Fed President Neel Kashkari hinting at December as potentially the time for a cut this year. And Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker said one cut by the end of the year is now his base case. But as the central bank awaits more data to inform future policy decisions, the risks to waiting begin pulling into focus. Former Chicago Fed President and CEO Charles Evans is joining us now to discuss. Charlie, thank you so much for being here. So, there's a lot of chatter about this now and about the balance of risks here. What is your outlook for how many cuts we could get this year?
Yeah, sure. It's a very interesting situation. The Fed has been looking for inflation to come down now for quite some time. I mean, in 2022, inflation hit 9% on the CPI, 7% on the PCE, and it's much too high. That's what every Fed participant says. And so they're looking to get it down to 2% sustainably. And they've made great progress recently. And labor markets have continued to be quite strong. And so with core PCE at about 2.75 right now, there's still a ways from that 2%. So as you just mentioned, 2%, two participants just today sort of indicated one rate cut this year is what their baseline is. They're looking to have more confidence that inflation is going to start coming down from 2.75 to 2%. And that's the hard part. And so they're going to be looking for more months of improving inflation before they even really talk about, I don't know, should they cut rates in December or what?
And what did you think there, Charles, just in terms of your own timeline? I'm interested because you saw Neel Kashkari over the weekend on another network, Charles, and he was suggesting, it's reasonable to think maybe the Fed now, waits until December. Does that sound like, the timeline that makes sense to you, Charles?
Well, I was not surprised that the median SEP for 2024 was only one rate cut this year. The FOMC has been talking uniformly about how they need more confidence. Confidence is what they need. They are not very detailed. They are not detailed at all in what it takes in order for them to become more confident. And so it's this currently, somewhat opaque process as to how many good inflation reports are they going to need to see before they say, okay, I think we're finally going to get down to 2%. They have the benefit of a strong economy right now. The unemployment rate is 4%. Historically, that's quite low. And the funds rate's at 5.3%. And they must be asking themselves, why should I cut rates early until I absolutely know that I'm going to get down to 2%? The economy is not really struggling. It is not struggling because of this, although individuals, of course, are struggling with higher debt interest costs.
Well,
so I think I don't know how many good inflation reports they're going to need to see, and I don't know for sure if the most recent good inflation report is going to continue. I'm hopeful that that's the case. And if it is, maybe they start thinking earlier than December. But right now, December looks like the modal bed.
And it definitely seems as though Federal Reserve members right now are by and large more concerned about a reacceleration of inflation than they are about a slowing of the economy. But we last week had the chance to talk with Allianz Chief Economic Advisor Mohamed El-Erian, and he is not so convinced that that's sort of how the balance of risks are looking. Listen to what he had to say.
So I think Chair Powell is correct in pointing out that there are two tails to the soft landing. The soft landing is what he's targeting, but there are risks on both sides. I think what he misses is the balance of that risk, that the balance, unfortunately, is in favor of them being too late and the economy slowing more than it should.
So I'm curious, Charlie, if you think that the Fed is appropriately cognizant of that risk that Mohamed outlines.
Oh, I'm confident that they are cognizant of that risk. I mean, Jay Powell has gotten that question at press conferences, and he has said we are mindful of our dual mandate responsibilities, and whether or not the labor market is going to soften, whether or not demand is going to soften. At the moment, there's not enough evidence that that is actually happening. Now, that does seem unusual because the funds rate has been at 5.3% for quite some period of time, and interest costs are higher. And so that must be getting in the way of some investment opportunities that businesses would like to undertake. But they really are committed to getting inflation down to 2%. They are undoubtedly embarrassed by the fact that inflation went up to 9% on the CPI, 7% on the PCE, and it's their job to get inflation down to 2%. They don't want to get stuck at 2.75%. I would say that the risks are not that. The most likely risks are not that inflation is going to reaccelerate. The most likely upside risk is that it's going to stall out, that it's going to require a softening economy in order to get inflation down. I think they're mindful of that. They're looking for softening. And if they get it, then they're going to sort of try to split the difference probably. But they're really committed to getting inflation to 2%. That's a very stiff performance bar. And I think that's perhaps what made Mohamed El-Erian a little bit nervous, that because they're focusing on that, they might not pay attention to the softening. I'm pretty confident that the FOMC is going to be mindful of all of those things.
Charles, another question I got for you, switching gears a bit. Retail sales tomorrow. Charles, interested to get your general take on the American consumer. How healthy, how resilient do they look to you?
The consumer has been surprisingly strong. They've been resilient throughout, this episode. I think that the high inflation has taken a toll on households. That's absolutely the case. That's what every FOMC member says for quite some time. I would say that, at the lowest income groups, they have seen stronger wage growth in part to make up for the high inflation. It's still the case that food prices are high, gas prices are high, unaffordable housing continues to be highly unaffordable. But the skew in income inequality, I think, has sort of probably left us with stronger consumer, a resilient consumer because of that. And it undoubtedly retail sales will soften at some point because of the higher interest rates. That's part of the Fed playbook over some period of time. But at the moment, looking at the economy, it still looks resilient. It still looks strong enough. It looks like a soft landing in terms of the economy being at trend growth. And no evidence yet of the unemployment rate moving materially above 4%.
Charlie, thanks so much for your insight. Appreciate it. Former Chicago Fed President Charles Evans, thank you.